Good evening. This is Maestro with the Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite Modcast. Today, we have a break from your regularly scheduled Faction War viewing to bring you a 1v1 on Calderis Refinery. Our first player is going to be Baserton, playing as the Lord General, squad-based hero for the Imperial Guard with the reinforceable retinue members out on the field. Man, I don't know what happened there. Focuses on defense and buffing spells. His opponent is going to be very, very hard to say. I don't know if this is Yriel or if maybe that Y is more of like a vowel and it's like Yriel. Regardless, I might not say this name too much going forward, but this player is playing as the Warp Spider Exarch. This is a teleporting ranged commander good for harassment and map control in 1v1 games. So this 1v1 that we have right here, it is not a high-level replay. If I'm completely honest, I'm not even sure if it's a mid-level replay, and I don't mean to say that in any way to condescend these players, but I just don't actually know the players well enough to say one way or the other. It is a replay submission, and I am just choosing to cast it right in the middle of the Faction Wars. I've casted about half of the July Faction Wars, and after this one I'll cast the other half. But for now, we have this 1v1 right here. 1v1 between the Eldar and the Imperial Guard. Now, the Imperial Guard are a race that were the last official race added to Dawn of War 2. And with the Imperial Guard, they're certainly an interesting race in many ways. Some people find them lame. I do think that they kind of have rather lopsided strengths and weaknesses compared to many of the other races. And there are some things that are unique about them. There are both some things they have that no other race has, and also some things that they don't have that every other race has. So one example that we're going to start it with is this Sentinel. This Sentinel is basically the core unit of the Imperial Guard Tier 1. It is generally pretty unlikely that you're going to have a Tier 1 that doesn't include a Sentinel. It's not completely unheard of, but it's generally unlikely. And there are very good reasons why. So one of those things that the Imperial Guard has that no other race has is they have a Tier 1 vehicle. The Sentinel's a Tier 1 vehicle. Now, the Sentinel doesn't have vehicle armor. It actually has heavy infantry armor. Grenade looks like it's not going to be dodged right there. Actually does a massive amount of damage. So you might be thinking, what does it matter if it is a vehicle? Oh wow, Warp Spider Exarch dead as well. What does it matter if the Sentinel is a vehicle, if it has heavy infantry armor, thus actually making it vulnerable to small arms fire? Aside from vehicle armor, kind of the defining element of a vehicle, or perhaps just the most useful thing about it, is that it doesn't bleed in any way. So it doesn't bleed in any way. That means it can, over the course of a game, theoretically tank an infinite amount of damage at no cost. So that means the Sentinel can be put in situations where if it is fighting directly against any Tier 1 squads, it will outtrade every single time as long as it doesn't die. So, of course, one of the other defining features of a vehicle is that you cannot retreat them. So that means that if your Sentinel is in a situation where you're panicking a little bit and you want to just get it out of danger, you can't just hit the X button to instantly give it an 80% range damage resistance. So there's a little bit of risk to that Sentinel that you kind of have in Tier 1 for Imperial Guard that you also don't have with any other race. But again, it's in situations like this where we have the Dire Avengers. If the Sentinel can fire at the Dire Avengers, which are not a particularly tanky unit, especially in Tier 1, and especially when they don't have their aspect, that they are quite effective. The Sentinel can be positioned in front of the Guardsman, because the Guardsman would be a bleedable unit. As long as the Sentinel takes damage, it can continue to get repairs. Oh man, we see there the Dire Avenger kind of going up real close, but oh, does this Sentinel get out alive from the Guardian Weapon Team? Looks like it does just in time. Now, because another defining feature of a vehicle is that it can be repaired by your baseline infantry unit. So aside from being able to theoretically tank an infinite amount of damage at no cost over the course of a game, a vehicle can also be sustained out on the field. You don't need to retreat it in order to restore its health, as long as you have a repair unit, which is generally not too hard to come by. Now, in this matchup, we also have Dire Avengers. Now, Dire Avengers, with no aspect, as we see this squad right here, they are no less squishy than Guardsmen. By default, both Dire Avengers and Guardsmen have 100 health. However, the Dire Avengers are much, much more expensive to reinforce, so every single one of those models that goes down is a lot more expensive for the Eldar. They don't want to give away as many models as the Imperial Guard does, and the Imperial Guard is already in a better position in terms of their army to not give away models because, again, they have that Sentinel to tank damage. Looks like it's going to be another grenade. This one slightly dodged there, but still catches 2 models. So the Dire Avengers, they actually reinforce for a cost of 27 requisition for just 1 model. By contrast, the Guardsmen, now that they have their Sergeant, are going to reinforce at a cost of 19 requisition for 2 models, which basically means 9.5 requisition for 1. So these Dire Avengers are, if they have no aspect, are just as squishy as the Guardsmen, but cost almost 3 times as much to reinforce. So it's very much on the Eldar player to be very, very careful about making sure that they don't bleed. However, it's also very much on your Imperial Guard player to not lose their Sentinel in Tier 1. So Sentinel does go down there, and that was, again, kind of reflective of we don't necessarily have a high-level game right here where that Sentinel really just did not react in time to the threat it was under, and it is gone. Now, the expected lifespan of a Sentinel is usually considered to be at least getting through Tier 1. At least getting through Tier 1. Luckily for Baserton, he was only just a little bit short of that. So although the way that Sentinel was lost looks a little embarrassing, it at least lived almost as long as it should have, which is effectively going to be enough. Looks like over here we're going to have Dire Avengers trying to maybe bash a generator. So now moving into Tier 2, there are certain paths we could see. Now, I've been talking a lot about Imperial Guard, but let's also talk a little bit about Eldar. Generally speaking, I think historically, this has been a matchup that I do think historically does kind of favor Eldar. Even though I would say that Tier 1, I would give it more to the Imperial Guard. But as the game goes on, things do change up a bit. So often the expected trajectory of this matchup for the Eldar is to go for Wraith Guard. Warp Spiders are also definitely... In fact, I mean, you could make a case for, I think, just about any of the Tier 2 units for Eldar in this matchup, but I think Wraith Guard are one of the things that we typically see from Eldar against Imperial Guard that is uniquely strong against Imperial Guard and not so much against other races. Chimera will come out for Baserton. Now, the Chimera kind of replaces the Sentinel as that core unit for the Imperial Guard. The Imperial Guard kind of have a core unit per tier. It's the Sentinel in Tier 1. It is the Chimera for Tier 2. I guess I would say it's probably the Leman Russ for Tier 3. And the Chimera obviously has a lot of this, actually has a lot of the same strengths as the Sentinel just by virtue of being a vehicle. Now, it's more of a regular vehicle in that it has vehicle armor, so it's effectively impervious to small arms fire. Certainly at least the piercing damage from the las guns and the shuriken catapults of the Dire Avengers. Some range damage weapon types do some minor damage to the Chimera, but basically it's just you need dedicated anti-vehicle to realistically threaten a unit like the Chimera. And then the Chimera, aside from being able to be repaired by Guardsmen, it actually has more of almost like a symbiotic relationship with the Guardsmen, which is technically true of just about any race with a transport. The transport is both a vehicle that can be repaired to be sustained out on the field, and a transport will also reinforce your Guardsmen units or really just any of your own friendly units to sustain them on the field. And you can theoretically keep a Chimera with Guardsmen on the field for a very, very long time. And again, this is something that's particularly useful with the Imperial Guard because of how cheap it is to reinforce those Guardsmen. We could also see, we've already got a Chimera upgraded on one of the Guardsman squads, so this Guardsman squad now reinforces at a cost of 3 for 1, so that 19 requisition reinforcement cost now reinforces 3 models, so divide that by 3, so now individual Imperial Guard models, or rather Guardsman models, are going to be costing about 6.33 requisition per model, if my caster math is correct. But the Wraith Guard are going to be a bit of a problem. So the Wraith Guard, in most matchups, are actually generally not considered particularly strong, and in most matchups are not a go-to purchase. But Wraith Guard exploit one of those weaknesses, one of those kind of lopsided weaknesses of Imperial Guard that I alluded to before. One of the things that Imperial Guard straight up does not have that every other race in this game has. And that's going to be the fact that the Imperial Guard do not have a jump unit whatsoever. Every other race in the game has some kind of jump unit, and basically just the idea is that jump unit can just basically point and click where the Wraith Guard are, burst movement over to them, and then just tie them up so that they can't fire those extremely powerful weapons. Imperial Guard straight up don't have that. Not only do they not have a jump unit, but they're kind of lacking melee units in general. Commissar usually has probably the simplest answer to this, in that he's kind of the most dedicated melee unit that the Imperial Guard have. And then there's Ogrins, which usually also has the best synergy with the Commissar because you can do the Inspired Determination Ogrins combo to put a lot. That not only helps you with just having a melee unit, but also giving you speed to close the gap. The Lord General can actually kind of do something similar if he switches out the sniper rifle for the grenade launchers and decides to get Ogrins, basically using that move ability to help speed the Ogrins into close range. But the sniper rifle is also kind of an indirect, not indirect, but just an alternative answer to the Wraith Guard. Ooh, we have a Manticore out on the field. So the sniper rifle has the fire on my target ability, which improves the weapon range of allied squads, or perhaps just your own squads probably. And you can use this basically in a way that you can activate fire on my target, and then you just straight up outrange the Wraith Guard. And if you have Plasma Guardsmen, you do quite a bit of damage that you can focus down the Wraith Guard and also kite them outside of their weapon range. So, ooh, okay. Wraith Guard, as well as Dire Avengers, coming out of a webway gate. They get a full generator bash, so that's a pretty sneaky play. Our Eldar player definitely making good use of that global mobility that Eldar have. Now, the only thing right here is that if our Imperial Guard player is more of a mid-level player or a little bit new, he should know to just come over here and take out this webway gate. It is infiltrated, but since he already saw that Eldar units came out of it, he could just put one of his own units here and bump into this, and it would eventually just detect it. And once you get close enough, you can just detect it that way, even without a regular detector unit, and just destroy it. Late game heavy weapon team is not late game. Well, technically mid game heavy weapon team. This one is an interesting one. It doesn't necessarily have like there's not a clear need for it. But there are certainly some things that it can do. Obviously, it'll just have long range. It'll definitely outrange. Certainly, any of the Eldar units can put a lot of damage on the Dire Avengers at long range. Also, again, put the damage on that Wraith Guard at long range. And since the heavy weapon team also has plenty of range itself, being a setup weapon, and then if it is buffed by fire on my target, it actually can shoot from very, very far away. So our Eldar player not choosing to get any other units just yet. Warp Spiders are generally something that are pretty strong against Eldar, and against Imperial Guard. That would kind of be my other choice, other than Wraith Guard in this matchup. Double grenades go in, but oh man, the Wraith Guard actually getting so low there, just tanking a lot of damage from the Chimera and especially this heavy weapon team. Wow, our Eldar player goes to Tier 3 and is going to get Seer Council. That's an interesting one. There isn't a whole lot in terms of control against the Seer Council, so the Seer Council won't really be able to... there's not something that's really going to crowd control them that easily. Dire Avengers apparently trying to throw a grenade on the Manticore, which doesn't do no damage. Does some, but of course, once the grenade is on cooldown, it's not like they can finish the Manticore off. The Seer Council, there's nothing like Catachans or a Heavy Bolter to really slow them down, but something like the Chimera, I feel could very effectively kite the Seer Council. So I think the best the Seer Council can do... Ooh, wow, it looks like we have continued pressure on the power here, by those Dire Avengers and even this Warp Spreader Exarch. Dire Avengers and Wraithguard probably just coming out of the webway again. But I'm not sure. Yeah, he's bringing them out. He's going to bring out the Seer Council here. So the webway gate worked out well for our Eldar player once. I'm not sure that the continued use of it, yeah, like right here, I mean, he's going to go for the Sentinel. But even drawing the Chimera over here, I'm not quite sure. Oh, Chimera actually getting a little bit in a shaky position there, almost kind of driving into its own Manticore strikes. And the Chimera almost dies but doesn't. And unfortunately, with a vehicle, when you almost kill it but don't, that's just not really, that just doesn't really do much for you, because it will just be repaired up for free. It does cost time, and that's definitely not insignificant, but it still just is nowhere near as important as just straight up taking the vehicle out. So our Eldar player buying a little bit of space with this, but at the moment he's actually been losing the victory points for a while, since he chose to go with that more indirect approach of going through the webway and not focusing on the middle victory point. It looks like he might have the Baserton's natural for a little bit of time. The Seer Council perhaps going in just a little bit too deep there. They're actually pretty lucky that they only lose 2 of their models. Meanwhile, this is still looking kind of like a tough fight for Baserton, until I think we maybe have a Manticore strike coming out. Because, yeah, I mean, head-to-head, the Guardsmen, oh my god, one of those Guardsman squads really lucky to not go down. So the Manticore strike will eventually chase off the Dire Avengers. So unfortunately, it happened off camera before, but the Guardian weapon team was lost from our Eldar player from a Manticore strike. So if you don't react to those Manticore strikes in time, they are quite devastating. They can actually they can full wipe a setup team from full health if the retreat button is not pressed in time. And that offensive from our Eldar player, I mean, certainly he's kind of locking Baserton out of much power, but he did not really get much in terms of victory points. He got some, but he took like such an indirect approach through the webway that it didn't manage to, despite pushing his opponent all the way back to his base, he wasn't able to have the VPs actually ticking down in his favor. Baserton actually reclaims the double cap, and he'll continue to tick victory points down in his favor. But certainly one of the troubling points for Baserton at this point, okay, we have all of these units coming out of the webway again, and I don't entirely approve. Especially, the Manticore is being used in a way that actually counters it pretty well, because you know where they're going to come from the webway, and if they just come out all in a group like that, it makes them a very nice, juicy target for the Manticore. However, the Seer Council do enough damage that they actually do take down the Lord General. Baserton, though, does have plenty of requisition, and we're going to see more the units just coming back out of the webway, coming out at half strength, so this is looking a little bit questionable. Even the Wraithguard, they're only at about 50% of their health, although the Manticore is getting unnecessarily close and needs to be very, very careful. Smoke Grenade or Smoke Shell will go out on the Wraithguard. Wraithguard's soon to be overwhelmed, though, and that's just a full retreat. So, yeah, I don't really like the continued use of the webway. I mean, in one sense, I guess he might be trying to go hunting for the Manticore, but there's not really that big of a prize here if there's not much of a generator farm to bash. And in the process, our Eldar player is giving up a lot of victory points. He's trying to get it now with these Dire Avengers. They'll at the very least get the decap, but the response to this should prevent them from getting a full cap. Now, I think in Baserton's case, there are 2 things that I feel Baserton should do, or at least one or the other. First of all, this webway gate needs to go. I mean, technically, his opponent could make another one, but it hasn't been dealt with. And again, you can just walk into it. You can just move your units right up to it, and you will detect it that way. And then you can destroy it. I guess he's trying. Oh my god. I guess he's might just be not close enough. The other thing he should do is probably not put his power down on his natural at the moment, as long as this is still here and he hasn't gotten rid of it. They're just going to come right out. Chimera is actually kind of in a bad position. Meanwhile, the guardsmen are... They have been suppressed by the Wraith Guard volley. Manticore Strike going to come in, though. The units don't get back inside the webway. Okay, the webway is very much revealed now. The guardsmen need to get reinforcements from the Chimera or just get inside of it. Now, these Seer Council do power melee damage the Wraith Guard pretty low. The Seer Council, if the guardsmen get inside this, or if they just, like, reinforce it, they might be able to just out-sustain the Seer Council despite the massive amount of damage the Seer Council do. Seer Council doing 40 DPS power melee per model, so that means they do 200 power melee DPS as a squad if they have all their models, which they still do. And they will just slice up the guardsmen very, very easily, but the guardsmen are just going to get reinforcement from this, and as low as they seem to be getting, they're getting their reinforcements just in time, and this is a fight that's not actually working out for the Seer Council at all. They're down to 3 models, and the reinforcements for the Chimera just keep coming in. So can he just walk up and touch that thing? I don't know if... This is one of those things where, I mean, he's seen it before. I don't know if maybe my knowledge is actually just outdated and you can't detect a webway by just, like, basically bumping your face into it, but I'm pretty sure you can. Anyway, Fire Prism is now going to be out for our Eldar player. Fire Prism is a very strong unit, regardless of what some YouTube commenters might say. Although it is a little bit risky against the Imperial Guard because they do have Melta Stormtroopers that can just infiltrate, sneak around, put a Melta Bomb on it, and then just, like, kind of blast the rear armor with Melta Guns. Don't know if we'll see that out of Baserton, but, I mean, he's still in Tier 2. It might be worth it for him to do that. He has put down a full power farm here, but there is still the webway gate. However, for our Eldar player, the returns, there might be diminishing returns of continuing to come out of the webway just to bash this power if he continues to be at a disadvantage in terms of victory points. However, he does have the double cap at the moment, and the Fire Prism will basically infinitely prevent whichever unit is on the victory point from attempting to cap. Now, the Fire Prism is way too close. Well, it is and it isn't. Now, on the one hand, the heavy weapon team with the autocannon actually does have range that is pretty comparable to the Fire Prism, but the Fire Prism can still get outside of the sight range of the heavy weapon team and then just attack ground and still continue to prevent any unit from getting anything. So we have more units coming out of the webway. Again, more on the power bash. But our Eldar player really does need to start being concerned about the victory points because he is getting pretty close to the double digits. And this is a Chimera that's coming to deal with a Fire Prism. The Chimera is doing piercing damage, and it's doing some very light damage that is slowly actually taking out this Fire Prism. Looks like some other things are happening around here. Manticore's pushing back. This is actually bizarre, where this Fire Prism is actually being taken out. Now, the Guardsmen getting out, with their plasma guns, they're going to do substantially more damage, and they can actually finish off the Fire Prism. Okay. That whole thing is a little monka, if you know what I mean. Like, I really don't want to, in any way, you know, try to bully or shame our players, but that particular engagement was a little hard to watch. So clearly just had his attention more down here with the other engagements, didn't recognize that the Fire Prism was under threat, and in most cases, you wouldn't look at a Chimera versus a Chimera and a Guardsman squad as really being a serious threat to a Fire Prism. But in that case, it was already very low on health, and it was taken out. So Baserton does actually manage to get enough power and resources to go to Tier 3. In fact, but our Eldar player is on the verge of a triple cap. So this is kind of exactly what our Eldar player needs. Now, on Baserton's side, one of the things that he's got in his favor is that he is basically floating a massive amount of red. Now, on the one hand, this is not so good in that it basically means he hasn't been using it all game, and there are a lot of There's a lot of missed opportunities by not using any of this red at all throughout the course of the game. But at least now that he has it, he's actually got quite a few cards in his deck. Oh my god, but this is a card that our Eldar player has in their deck, and it doesn't look like it's going to be reacted to in time. That Eldritch Storm finishes off the Chimera as well as the Guardsman squad, and that makes things a whole lot worse for Baserton. If he had kept those alive, things would be looking a lot better for him. He's going for a Leman Russ. Unfortunately for him, that also means that will eventually necessitate a Guardsman purchase as well. And he'll also need to put upgrades into those Guardsmen, because he will, in the long run, need repairs for the Leman Russ. But, I mean, the Chimera at this point, the Chimera, I think, is actually a reasonable loss. And the Imperial Guard kind of has this thing where they've got a core unit, which is often a vehicle, in each tier. And then by the end of that tier, it's kind of expected that it will die. The bigger loss there is actually not the Chimera, but the Guardsman squad. The Guardsman squad that had upgrades. Rocket Run. So finally, we're going to see some use of that red. Now, the Rocket Run is very reliable, does not quite have the same amount of destructive power as some of the other nukes, and doesn't manage to finish off either of these squads. It comes so close. Oh man, if only there was like another Imperial Guard unit there that could actually have been there to follow up on that, to finish off both of those Dire Avenger squads, would have been a big win for Baserton. As it is, looks like Baserton actually lost his artillery spotters while all this other stuff was happening. So the Leman Russ is here, however. Upgrading to the Vanquisher is a really strange one, and again, that's also something where I don't know if I feel that the upgrade to the Vanquisher is really the best choice, and it could also just be something that, again, might be like our player not having the full extent of game knowledge to really make the best choice there. I mean, if we had to make an argument for the Vanquisher has the longest range of all of the Leman Russ weapons, so it can just significantly outrange the Wraith card and put pressure on them. The Vanquisher is considered an anti-vehicle variant, but it actually does hit infantry with good accuracy. It does explosive damage type, but it doesn't do splash, unlike the other variants. Ooh, and it looks like we're going to end it off with a little bit of toxicity. So kind of a strange game right there. Hope you enjoyed it, and have a good night.